Pulchra is the first ever physical stun agent to be released in ZenlessZoneZero, and I'll be honest, I'm pretty excited for her, especially since she'll come free to us in a later 1.6 event. With this though, I decided to test every single team composition involving Pulchra. In today's video, I'll be showing you the results of these tests, how to play her, and what her pros and cons are. But as with all videos like this guys, my goal with this is to give you a better look and idea at Pulchra and whether or not you should build her. Before I continue though, I'd like to remind you all that the footage from today's video will be from the creator beta server, so things are subject to change. But with this out of the way, let's now break down every single Pulchra team. Despite stunners traditionally being on-field dazers, Pulchra and Trigger are both designed as characters who excel when off-field. For Pulchra specifically, she first relies on entering into the Hunter's Gate state via an EX special attack, an assist follow-up, a chain attack, or through her ultimate. Afterwards, she looks to take advantage of its increased daze passive against enemies. However, because of the way that Hunter's Gate and her special attack, Rending Claw Nightmare Shadow works, Pulchra is forced to stay off-field to be effective. When not the active agent, Pulchra will perform dashes against enemies, dealing decent damage and daze, but this is only activated if her allies use special attacks, furthering her need to be off-field even more. If her allies then follow these special attacks with additional strikes against an enemy, Pulchra will repeat this move up to 5 times and also drain this unique resource bar. After these 5 additional strikes are consumed, Pulchra can then re-enter the field, exit the Hunter's Gate state, and re-enter this daze enhanced form again through any of the previously mentioned methods. So in short, enter into the Hunter's Gate state, use as many of her additional strikes as possible, then take Pulchra off field to then repeat this cycle all over again. Now it's time though for us to actually talk about her kit mechanics. As always, this next section is an explanation and summary of Pulchra's mechanics, but the actual full breakdown will come in the later guide, so stay tuned for that. With this, let's now break down what her kit is all about. Pulchra's core passive is what details Hunter's Gate and its effect. When she uses an EX special attack, assist follow-up, chain attack, or ultimate, Pulchra enters this enhanced state, which increases her daze output by 30% for 6 seconds. If she switches out while in Hunter's Gate, this effect remains until she re-enters the field. But in addition to this, landing a heavy attack while in this form triggers a quick assist from the previous character. Her additional ability, Business Partner, activates when an ally is an attack character or is from the Sons of Caledon. Once active, when she lands a hit with specific attacks like Rending Claw Nightmare Shadow, her EX special attack, her assist follow-up, her chain attack, or ultimate, she applies Binding Trap for 15 seconds, increasing aftershock damage against said target by 30% for all allies. Now, passives and bonus stats aside, let's now move to her abilities. Pulchra's basic attacks are a standard and deal okay daze, but aren't really worth using since ideally she stays off field to make full use of Hunter's Gate and Nightmare Shadow. On that note, let's now talk about Hunter's Gate and Nightmare Shadow in terms of how they work. Hunter's Gate, which activates when she performs an EX special attack, assist follow-up, chain attack, or ultimate, increases the daze she deals by 30% for 6 seconds as we mentioned previously. Pulchra's special attack, Rending Claw Nightmare Shadow, triggers when she's in the Hunter's Gate form when an ally lands a heavy attack from either a normal or EX special attack. This move causes Pulchra to dash back and forth, piercing enemies around the target and dealing physical damage as we previously mentioned. But of course, if another ally lands an attack, she repeats the move up to 5 times, with this being where she deals the most daze and damage. As an important side note and reminder, this move specifically deals aftershock damage, so pairing this with characters like Soldier Zero Ambi or anyone that affects aftershock damage will be ideal. Her EX special attack, Rending Claw Flash Step, deals decent damage as well, but this ability is primarily designed to either dodge enemy attacks or to enter/re-enter the Hunter's Gate state quickly. Regarding her dodge related abilities, none are noteworthy and Pulchra shouldn't remain on field long enough really to make use of them. But then we have her assists. Though seemingly normal, Pulchra's assists play a very important role in her kit, as consuming 1 assist point during an assist follow-up after an evasive assist enables her to enter the Hunter's Gate state. This is actually one of the best ways for Pulchra to re-enter said form, so this is definitely something to keep in mind as you play Pulchra. Final set of skills to break down are her chain and ultimate. Now these abilities do deal a decent amount of damage depending on how well your Pulchra is built and what sets you use on her, but it's also important to remember that using a chain or ultimate will cause Pulchra to also re-enter into the Hunter's Gate state. Before we get into the team, I would like to explain the structure of my tests quickly once again. First, the teams listed in this next section will include a main DPS, Pulchra of course as the stunner, and a support since Pulchra's role as a stunner typically allows a buffed damage dealer to take a support in order to shine. However, for Pulchra to gain the most value with all types of agents, agents, she does need her 6th Mindscape in order to buff all damage types, not just Aftershock. Additionally, like with Ambi, I did test other variations like double DPS with Pulchra 2, but unfortunately my findings this time around were relatively the same again as with Ambi. This means that pairing someone like Miyabi and Bernice alongside Pulchra doesn't really showcase much, and instead Pulchra in these cases were more like a budget DPS and would otherwise have been better replaced by a different support or DPS in order to increase your overall clear time. Now because of this, if I chose to play other variations that didn't have a DPS or a support, it was very possible that any team I tried were viable, but rather that they were simply carried by other factors. Ultimately, these teams still had the burden of being less realistic, or ones that I simply couldn't bring myself to recommend. But as always, do with this information what you will. To remind you all of the standards for my testing quickly, the following team results assumed M6 on A ranks, as mentioned earlier, M0 on S ranks, and the signature / W engines / reasonable alternatives on every single character. This of course again means that a character like Miyabi would have her signature and that someone like Nicole would have the vault. However, like before, additional tests were sometimes conducted if a signature performed too poorly, like with Ambi's. And finally, these findings still need context, as things like the target, their health, their buffs, and other factors definitely affect the speed of these experiments. All that aside though, let's now explore what I found when testing 100 different Pulchra teams. The first set of teams I tested included A-rank DPS agents alongside Pulchra. This included characters like Anton, Billy, Ben, Corin, and Piper, but it's important to mention that I didn't restrict the supports in terms of characters that they could be paired with. With this, there were a few trends that emerged. First, any team that involved Astra Yao led to a notably faster clear time by about 5 to 10%. Second, Caesar, Lucy, and Nicole were the top performers for any team, regardless if they were an attack or anomaly agent. Now finally, the most clear result came from the feel and performance regarding Piper, and though it took some time to initially figure out what each of Piper's team's gameplay goals were, the performance and feeling after figuring it out was much better and satisfying than her peers. Additionally, even though attack agents like Billy and Corin also had the opportunity to be paired with the game's first ever physical stunner, it was surprising to see that Piper actually had a more consistent showing with her instead, despite being an anomaly character. Now, performance-wise, these characters did technically have relatively similar clear times when paired with Astra Yao. The gap between the agents was much more noticeable, with anywhere between a 10 to 25% difference in clear speed depending on the comparison. Recommendations wise, I would honestly avoid using Pulchra with most of the A ranks unless she was paired with someone like Caesar, Nicole, or Astra in addition. However, the tests conducted within these experiments were against a slightly lower held target, which means that the performance of these characters could definitely suffer even more if you use them against tankier enemies. That said, Piper Pulchra Lucy and Piper Pulchra Astra didn't really feel bad at all to play. But of course, that's assuming M6 on all these agents alongside a potential limited S rank. Moving along to the S rank agents, this is where things get much more complicated. At the top end, Miyabi, Evelyn, and ZenlessZoNZero Ambi all performed well as expected, but then came the performance of the standard banner agents and some older 1.0 limited characters. Agents like Nekomata and Soldier 11 were much worse than expected when paired with Pulchra, and this was especially shocking as I had initially theorized that Nekomata could gain value if she had a physical stunner to aid in her gameplay. However, because her damage and performance, even without Pulchra, was lacking, this did not help much. Another interesting find from these results was that Yanagi performed worse than expected as a solo DPS, but these results do make sense when you consider that Yanagi only performs best when paired with other anomaly agents like Miyabi or Bernice. In terms of feel, it should be known that main field / greedy DPS like Miyabi, ZenlessZoNZero Ambi, Evelyn, and Juyuan were the most straightforward, simple, and easy to handle with Pulchra. That said, when comparing the performance of the top end DPS to the others, these teams were clearing roughly 40% faster than the average team. This of course doesn't mean that every top end team was insane, but it does mean that there was a clear distinction between agents who easily succeeded and those who didn't. As a final note, it should be mentioned that the characters did have slightly better performances if they matched element weaknesses with the boss, but that doesn't really change the overall conclusions that were drawn for the characters anyway. After all this testing, I did have a few suggestions for teams worth playing regarding Pulchra, and the first is involving ZenlessZoNZero Ambi, with Pulchra as the most logical idea. Now, when used properly, Ambi and Pulchra paired with any support do destroy content quickly, but given recent news, Ambi will have a new comfortable partner that replaces Pulchra once trigger releases. Moving from Ambi, using Miyabi and Evelyn for Pulchra also made sense, but it's important to consider that these two characters are some of the highest statistical DPS in the game. That said, I did find that including a Pulchra on a team felt best when you simply didn't want to have a stunning agent like Chingy on field for long, but of course that's not the only factor to consider when talking to an agent on your team. Now for the fastest team result of all the tests I conducted, there were two that actually tied the most for most consistent result. Though I did expect Miyabi to take this title, or I expected Miyabi, Evelynn, and Ambi to remain relatively close competitively, I was surprised to see that Miyabi and Ambi specifically were slightly ahead of Evelynn. This could definitely been the case because Ambi and Miyabi don't necessarily need Pulchra to deal with higher damage, but at the same time, Evelynn is a character who benefits the most when she can stay on field for long periods too. Despite all this, the difference in performance on Evelynn, Miyabi, and Ambi weren't enough to declare one a clear winner or the other, especially considering the different factors at play. As a result, the best teams for Pulchra were definitely team compositions involving Miyabi, Ambi, or Evelynn. Now this is where I was going to end this section, but after extensive testing, I did feel it worth mentioning that Miyabi, Yanagi plus Pulchra did actually outperform all other variants by a decent amount. However, because of how powerful Yanagi and Miyabi are by themselves, alongside the weakness of the boss, I didn't really feel comfortable declaring this team the absolute best. Now, teams and kit aside, let's talk about Pulchra's pre-farm materials. You'll need the following amount if you want to upgrade Pulchra to 60. 3,705,000 dennies for the purpose of upgrading your agent skills and ascensions, 30 buster seals, 32 advanced stun seals, and 4 basic stun seals to ascend Pulchra to 60, and 300 senior investigator logs for the purpose of leveling. You'll also need 250 specialized, 75 advanced, and 25 physical chips if you're trying to get her to plus 12. But in addition to this, if you want to reach level 12, you'll also need 5 hamster cage passes for these skills to hit level 12. To completely upgrade her core passive, you'll need 9 notorious hunt materials from Corrupted Overlord Pompey, known as Scarlet Engines. And now finally, you'll also need 60 higher dimension data drops from Jane's Doppelganger in Expert Challenge. If you're looking to pull and upgrade her signature W engine, you'll need the following though: 320,000 dennies, 24 specialized, 26 reinforced, and 4 stun components. And to level said W engine, you'll need 160 W engine energy modules too. For Pulchra's disk drive set, she shares the same best option as Ambi, as both are aftershock applying Garens, but interestingly, Pulchra isn't a character who performs best on Shockstar Disco despite being a singer. This is one of the rare moments where a character's kit actually deters players from choosing to run 4-piece Shockstar, as the set's effect is quite difficult to activate or maintain in this case. And thus, though Shockstar is still an amazing choice as your 2-piece set effect, her best set is not actually Shockstar. As a result, in terms of options, using 4-piece Shadow Harmony for its Aftershock buff and Shockstar as the 2-piece set effect is my recommendation. For W engine choices, Pulchra's signature is very good despite being an A rank, but Precious Fossilized Core and Steam Oven are also decent options too. Despite this being the case, it is worth noting that Hellfire Gear also synergizes well with her playstyle. However, at the end of the day, using whatever you have upgraded or one of the S rank W engines for the added days could be worthwhile too. The last section of today's video is in regards to pros and cons for building Pulchra. Here's what you should think about before you consider investing her. Pros: her damage buffing to Aftershock related attacks is strong and also exclusive to her and Ambi for the current available roster. Pulchra spends very little time on field, making her a great partner for any agent who is demanding / greedy for field time. Next, the best pro about Pulchra is that she's being given out for free during 1.6 as an event reward. But finally, Pulchra's 6th Mindscape transforms her value to be attack Aftershock related. Prior to her 6th Mindscape, her damage buffs are honestly pretty limited / restrictive. Once Trigger is released, Pulchra's value will see a dramatic fall considering Trigger plays similarly and fits a similar role. Her ability to daze is pretty team reliant, and some characters are better or worse than others at activating her 5 additional hits to generate stun on an enemy, but those were the pros and cons for the section. Anyways guys, that's gonna be it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed, hope you guys learned something. If you did, feel free to check out the rest of my socials, like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. I am your resident test all these things out, so hopefully you have a better idea of whether or not you should pull for this character now. Anyways guys, I'll see you guys on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy, good night.